let me have you introduce yourself, and we'll kind of start with that, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yes, well, good morning. I'm Andrew Sewell, music director of the San Luis Obispo Symphony. I'm also music director of the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah. So what got you started in conducting? I did read, like we were talking before, you started at 16. So what sparked that?
Actually, I decided I wanted to be a conductor when I was 14. I started trying to conduct when I was 16, yeah. I'm a pianist and a violinist, and grew up in one of 7 children in a small town in rural New Zealand, about 60 miles north of the capital, Wellington.
Yeah.
Little town called Violin, 15,000 people.
Wow.
I had 4 older brothers and 2 sisters, and everyone was learning the piano, and my mother wanted us all to learn the piano, and I just started on it when I was like 5, 6, just hammering away, and started having lessons, and and we used to go along the British Royal Schools of Music plan. It was like you go through these grades, right? And you learn these pieces, and you take an exam at the end of the year, and you pass grade 1, you pass grade 2, and all the way up to grade 8. And so it's not like the American system.
Yeah, sure.
So there's the Royal Schools of Music and the Trinity College, and so when you get up to like grade 7 or grade 8, part of the test is you play these 3 pieces, and then they test your sight reading, then they test your oral skills, AURAL, oral.
Okay.
Not oral, oral.
Okay.
Oral meaning listening and sort of things like that. And one of those tests was that the examiner would sit down and start playing away and say, now conduct, you know.
Oh, really?
Beat in time, is this in 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, you know, and we have to sit there, and I enjoyed that. And I thought,
okay.
Wouldn't that be cool? I wonder what that's like.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got into an orchestra. I got into a local brass band when I was like 7 or 8, and then I wanted to learn the violin. So I saw a violin in a shop, and my parents said, "Well, if you want to learn, just save up half the money, and we'll pay the other half. It costs $10." So I mowed lawns and washed cars and earned $5 and bought my violin. It was a half size. And originally my dad started teaching me a little bit because he used to play, and then I went to the local elementary school, middle school, and they offered lessons through the public schools. So I started learning the violin through public schools. So I'm a huge advocate of the way to learn music is through public school, public education. So I had private piano lessons, but I couldn't afford to have private violin lessons. So.
Was there many teachers out there at that time, though?
No.
Probably not, right?
There was a traveling violinist and itinerant violinist who come to the school on Thursdays. That's right. And I had to ride my bicycle over to the high school and take a lesson there. You know, of course, I got teased like crazy. You know,
you're the violin.
Well,
you're
I'd
like,
say,
hey, man, I paid for that.
Your machine gun. What do you got? Your machine gun, and they'd sort of get my bike and rough me up. You know, and I had to have stretchies. You know, those things that you
on the wheels or whatever.
You tie your violin on the back. I mean, that thing must have gone through. I'm surprised it fell off my bike a few times, and I'm surprised that the thing didn't get broken.
Oh, that's cool though.
Yeah.
So you started. That's cool. So I don't know if that's not similar to like, you know, an American story as far as music goes, right? I mean, how was it? Thinking about that, and your parents were like, "Well, I don't know how you're gonna do that here." Right? Was that anything like that, or anything like conducting as a job?
Oh no, that was not even on the horizon.
Oh, okay.
So let's jump forward. I started getting serious when I was 13 or 14 about the violin, and I joined an orchestra, youth orchestra, about 35 miles away. And so on Friday nights, I'd have to get a ride up there. My mother would sometimes take me, and then by this stage, I started having piano lessons at this place. And it was called, you know, it's a youth symphony, and I was sitting in there, and I kept looking up at the conductor thinking, oh, that'd be really cool to do that one day. I ended up being the concert master of this youth orchestra, and then I just thought, that's really what I want to do. I want to be a conductor. So I started just thinking about how I would go about doing that. And everyone I spoke to said, well, you just got to get your own groups together and just do it, you know, And so by the time I was 16, I was sort of helping the local school choir director, you know, conduct some choirs. And then I started taking some lessons with a conductor and studying a score or two. And I had to really bring up my theory, learning about harmony and things to be able to understand what that means. And actually being a pianist is very helpful. You got,
right.
So I just figure, you got 10 fingers. Just think that if that was an orchestra, an instrument, you got 10, that was my rationale, that, it's just like playing a piano, except you got people out there and you got this little stick, and you sort of direct over there and over there.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds kind of a little comical, but yeah, I really became quite serious about it. And so I was a junior in high school and I went to this national secondary schools, and I guess I was a bit of an upstart, cocky, confident, boisterous. I was the second youngest of 7 kids. Come on. I mean,
what are you going to do?
You got to be scrappy to
survive.
Sure.
Hey, I'm a middle kid too. I get you, man.
There's no food left on the table. It's just fight or die, And so, I went up to the conductor at this secondary school swing on the first day and just bopped up to him and said, hey, if you've got any conducting, I'd really like to conduct. He goes, okay, yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
And I thought, oh, well, I really goofed that one up. Well, then about 3 days in, he's conducting me. He stops the rehearsal. He looks at me, points at me and goes, we've got something for you. And I said, huh? And apparently there was a little wind ensemble that they didn't have enough conductors for, so I asked if I'd conduct it. Oh. And then I conducted it in the concert. I thought, oh, that's pretty cool.
Nice. So you liked it after that, though?
Oh, no. I always wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So, it's I don't know. It's a bit like a pie in the sky aspiration, because you're just a kid, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you think, well, it's usually adults do that sort of stuff. But what I sort of learned was people, if you've got colleagues and friends and you can cajole them and twist their arms, they'll do anything. If they want to do something, they'll do it. As you feed them or something, give them a piece of cake, they'll come and play. Yeah. Well, we were too young for that, but
I don't know. I mean, maybe.
Well, anyway, so jump forward. I decided that I'd go to university to. I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, and I definitely wanted to do music. But my dad, he came in and he sat me down and said, "Now, son, Andrew."
Yeah, right.
He's got 4 other boys. He says, "Now, look. Just keep music as a hobby, maybe you should do science or do something practical and da-da-da-da-da." And I said, look, Dad, I really, really want to do music. And I said, okay, well, and he said, oh, okay. I said, well, look, can I do a music degree? And if it doesn't work out, I'll go back and do science. He goes, okay. And we shook on it, right? A handshake really meant a lot.
Yeah.
And he's old school. So.
Sure.
So
you were in then.
He was okay.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, so I've really got to make this work, because if I don't, I'm going to have to go back to do a science degree after I finish my music degree, and I've got to make sure I honour my dad.
Right. Well, that's cool, man.
So after doing a 4-year violin performance degree, which I decided to study violin rather than piano, because my piano teacher said, look, if you really want to be a conductor, you've got 1 in 30 chance of getting a job as a violinist in an orchestra, whereas there's only 1 pianist in an orchestra.
True.
It sort of reduces your
job opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a pianist, you can either be a ballet repetiteur, which is playing for ballet, or in the opera, playing in the pit, or teaching lessons, or you're good enough to be a soloist. But that's kind of way out there. But it was good to have the skills. But playing the violin was really important, because, a third of the orchestra are strings, you got violins and cello and viola. So that was a smart move on my piano teacher's side, and really good advice.
Looking out.
Yeah, I did my violin performance degree. And then after that, I auditioned for the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra, which is a professional orchestra in town, and I got in. And at the time, along the way, I met and married my wife. 40 years we've been married. We met in the New Zealand Youth Orchestra in 1982 and got married in 1984. And I joined the orchestra, and she is also a violinist, and she was in the orchestra as well. So we spent 4 years playing in the Auckland Philharmonia professionally, and then I was looking for opportunities to conduct while I was doing that. So I spent some time when I was at university. I took some conducting classes. I kept pushing the chair of the department. I said, well, you said you're going to have a choral conducting class. Can we do that? And what about an orchestral class? And I don't know, I just kept needling away. There weren't any opportunities in New Zealand or Australia.
Right.
There was one program in Melbourne called at the Victorian College of the Arts, which was a postgraduate conducting degree, but there really wasn't anything past my undergraduate for me to do. And so I just played in the orchestra. Mm-hmm. And we would have guest conductors who would come over and conduct the orchestra, from overseas. And so every conductor that I'd ask them, I'd watch them, I'd study a score, I'd ask them questions. And then this one conductor came. His name was Donald Tilly, and he said, we're developing conducting workshops in the United States. This would be something you could probably, if you could get there, it'd be great.
Right.
So I said, yeah, this is great. This was 1985. So I made a plan, and I applied for some money, and there was a conducting workshop at Juilliard, and I thought, well, I'll apply and see what happens.
Oh, at Juilliard, huh?
Mm.
Oh, wow.
So I actually applied for some money. I had no money. So there was this thing called the Young Achievers Award that had just started up for young people.
Yeah.
And you had to be under 23. I was 23.
You get in there. You're like,
So, I made this big plan.
Yeah.
You had to get used to, all along the way, you had to learn to apply for grants. I'd applied for an Arts Council grant. I formed my own chamber orchestra in Auckland. I'd done everything I could while I was in school. I almost got in trouble. I almost got kicked out of school because at one point I was doing too much conducting. Like, I had a church choir, and I was putting all my energies into conducting when I should have been studying the violin. So I got a kick up the pants from my
your parents or something.
Metaphorically speaking, from my violin teacher. She said, you're not practicing enough. Get your head out of the clouds. You're here to study the violin.
Yeah, I could see
and
that.
it was like deer in headlights. Yeah, man, I'm going to get kicked out. No, that's not a good idea. So, so I had to drop everything, and I had to drop this choir I was doing. I finished off my degree, and then I went back into it again. So that was an important lesson about prioritizing, actually. I use that as a really good... Sometimes things happen that to shape your life that you need those kind of like, holy smokes, people can be telling you things that you should be doing.
Yeah, it's like the come to Jesus moment that we call it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So it was a very fascinating kind of time, because the only thing that you can do as a conductor is you have to conduct something, right?
Right.
You got to have people in front of you. And if no one's going to come along and say, I've got this orchestra over here, would you like to do it? You have to push your own wheelbarrow.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's awesome.
You've got to create opportunities. That's what I tell any young conductors. I said, well, come along to rehearsal and watch.
Yeah.
Be excited about it. Don't just say, I want to do this, and then sit in your armchair and go, okay, wait for things to happen,
Right, exactly.
Happen.
So what were you listening to kind of in that period, if you can remember, kind of your early years, like as far as like music goes, to kind of influence what you're doing now? That's
a really interesting question. I really got into, what my older brothers were listening to. But I got into Emerson, Lake and Palmer. That was a cool group.
Mm-hmm.
And some Earl Clue, which is a guitarist from out of Detroit. And just some
good music coming out of there.
Yeah, just so different stuff. There's so much from Motown and things.
Yeah, exactly.
But of course, I liked classical music, of course, and I was playing any music that was in the orchestra. And just a little bit of Al Jarreau, and I liked. I really like Chick Corea too, and Keith Jarrett, and some of those performers. But then I think one of those trips, my wife and I, we for that Juilliard trip, the next year I went to the Juilliard workshop. I did actually make it. I first of all I won some money from the Young Achievers Award, which gave me a grant to take a trip. So I went to England and I went to Juilliard. I went up to Birmingham to watch the City of Birmingham Orchestra with Simon Rattle conducting. Now, Simon Rattle was a star conductor that was just making headlines in the 80s, and I thought, he was like someone that I'd really wanted to aspire to be. So I just wrote to them and said, could I come and sit on some of your rehearsals?
Oh,
and
really?
Said, yeah. And they said, yeah, sure, come.
What?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. You just got to ask. They can only say no.
It's true. True, yeah.
And so I went up there and I watched rehearsals. They were doing sort of the Rite of Spring and this incredible stuff. And I went up to him and he said, I'll come and have some lunch. And I sat down with him and I just said, what do you want to do? I said, I just want to be a conductor, And, get your own groups together and keep at it. And that's it.
Oh, he gave you that advice. You were able to talk to him and stuff like that.
Yeah, amazing.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Very, no fear, I guess.
Yeah, when you're young, you're like,
just ask. And you don't know what you don't know, so you can't.
That's right.
You can't be. And I say the same thing because sometimes ignorance is a great asset. Totally. As long as people don't judge you for it, you go clearly. You just you just don't know. So you're just asking some questions. And if you're curious, that's the best way to be in anything.
Exactly. Totally. So then you went to Juilliard to do that as well.
It's just a 3-day workshop, right?
And you kind of
So it was like a 3-day workshop. Juilliard. I was 23 years old, never been out of the country. Here I am in New York City, and I'm scared. Like,
it's probably a while back then too.
I was very afraid. I was staying at somebody's house. I'd never been on a subway. I just go down, come up. There's Juilliard. Go to there. Go home. Eat my dinner. Go home. And I was scared. I didn't look around. I was just petrified. But the teacher there was Gustav Meyer, who was teaching at the University of Michigan, and I'd never seen someone teach conducting, and that was really wowed me. And the master teacher was Zubin Mehta, and he was conducting the Juilliard Orchestra. And I was one of 40 conductors, and I was just sort of like starstruck trying to figure out what I want to do. He said, and I quote, he said, "If you want to come and hang out at Michigan, come on over." I said, okay. So went home to New Zealand, saved up some money, planned a trip the next year, 5 weeks, went to Michigan and just hung out, audited some of the classes, and just like I said, just sort of hang out. There's another word for it, coattailing, but that's slightly different. But I just wanted to learn and learnt that way. And then at the end of that 5 weeks, he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I'd really like to study with you." And well, he said, "Apply for the position, apply for the program, and do this." And eventually I got into the master's degree program, and then we moved over here in 1988, and I did a master's degree in conducting with that Gustav Meyer at the University of Michigan, and that got me into it. I made Detroit was sort of the hometown, and I started conducting some orchestras around the Detroit area after I graduated. My wife and I had 2 kids by that stage. If you're a dad, the little kids you got to provide for them.
Exactly.
I better get real and get some work going here.
Yeah.
So that was inspiring, and we were always playing the violin in various orchestras: the Flint Symphony, Saginaw Symphony, Ann Arbor Symphony, Kalamazoo Symphony. We were gigging around because
so they have a big like orchestra, like kind of, I wouldn't say like business, but like scene there. I guess
yes, there is. Well, in any big city,
this
is there are suburban orchestras, and I would say to any young person, even young violinists, there are lots of strata of orchestras. In New Zealand, there were 5 orchestras.
Mm-hmm.
There were 1,750 when I came over.
I mean,
it's probably
got
a
bigger.
Smaller. Yeah, it's just everything's bigger. There's more opportunities. It is a land of opportunities. So.
Yeah. So how is adjusting to life there versus you coming to America? You're young, and but is there any difference between, like, I guess I don't know if it's the musical culture, but differences in approach as far as like where you're at in New Zealand versus America?
Very much so. Yeah. So that's a really good question, Tom. So we are a Commonwealth country. We're part of England.
Yeah. Right.
He's our king, King Charles. We've that. So we're steeped in sort of the British tradition. So we were, like I said, that royal schools and stuff. But what America's worked out is how to do things on a high level in terms of technique and things. And so you want to learn an instrument, they just have it down in terms of technique. I mean, of course, so does England and everything else. But there was not a place where you could actually like learn conducting or have a program where they teach you conducting. And so there's resources just so much more.
Right.
I had a conducting teacher in New Zealand. His name was Juan Mariucci. He was Italian. He came up through the opera, and he was my mentor. I mean, and I became his assistant at the opera, and that's how I ended up conducting one of the operas when I was in New Zealand at 22. But he always said, it's a tough profession you're asking to go into. So you just got to have a lot of tenacity and don't give up.
Yeah, right. So, but there's no like, because I know like, I would say that America definitely has a different approach to like music, and it's more, I don't know, I would say maybe more in your face a little bit and more aggressive, and just like it has its own style versus a European steeped in the traditions, like you said, like from Britain and stuff like that, and even Asia, they have their own stuff going on too, which is really cool too. Did you have to adjust to that, or you're like, no, like this is kind of...
No, you're absolutely putting your finger on it. Yeah, so we're apologetic as a nation, Whereas over here, I get saying, you don't put yourself forward enough, and it certainly is the country of the individual, the individual shines.
Yeah.
And we're much more retiring, I should say. We're not encouraged like the tall poppy syndrome is tough. You go home and, well, where have you been?
Yeah, right.
And so I have to sort of adjust to these two cultures. In New Zealand, not be too forthright, and then in America, I'm not forthright enough. And,
right.
And so that's been an adjustment. But I really also appreciate in this country, they still have the traditional music director role where, as a conductor, you're in charge of the music of the orchestra. You're the leader, you're the conductor, and that you have some authority in that regard, and you can make some decisions. So the orchestra that we played in the Auckland Philharmonia at the time had reformed itself as a sort of like a collective, if you like. And so the players ran the orchestra. They were committees, and we hired the general manager, and then they brought in guest conductors. So, when you're a guest conductor, you can help that week, but you don't really have much say over the actual artistic product in a long-term way.
Okay.
So that was an interesting, because New Zealand's way down there in the South Pacific, we don't have access. It's a long flight, we don't have access, we don't have the money and things like that. So they would have guest conductors and things. So that was fascinating. And when I came over here, I started realizing that the model actually works because you can really develop an orchestra's sound by what that particular music director at that particular time, how they develop the orchestra. So, for example, you hear about the Chicago Symphony when George Solti was, the brass section is amazing, and George Solti built that up. You hear about George Zell and the Cleveland Orchestra. 10 years he transformed that orchestra to be the orchestra that it is today. You hear about the greats like Fritz Reiner in Chicago. You hear even now Dudamel in Los Angeles, or before him Esa-Pekka Salonen. And so those personalities really have an amazing way of, through their own personalities and musicality, to shape the sound or develop the sound of the orchestra. Of course, the orchestra by itself as an institution is amazing.
Right, so, exactly.
You have to be a really bright cook, really good at it, and they're very discerning. I mean, it's just one or two really top people that do that sort of thing,
Yes, so it was their, like all those people you mentioned, it's kind of their goal to kind of go one direction or another. Like you said, one orchestra is like known for like their strong brass section, and they're kind of refining that as they kind of go. And people come and are like, hey, this is kind of what I want to listen to. Yes, and you can actually, and that's why we have so many recordings that we have access to. You can hear any number of orchestras play the same piece, and there's a different interpretation. And so, that's kind of what I wanted to get into. It's like, how much control do you have as a conductor over the piece? Because you have to kind of like, a lot of stuff that you play is probably already been played like a million times, and you're like, how can I put my own spin on it? Or if that's even your job. Well, that's true. First of all, I would say that part of the training of being a conductor is actually knowing the repertoire. So it's really helpful to play an orchestral instrument. Yeah, right. And at some point in your life, you have to study all of these pieces and listen to what others have done. Or you've been, and like I have, playing in the orchestra with practical hands-on, and, conductor comes in and you know how he rehearses this and what he had to say, and you remember that. And then another conductor comes in, and it might have been 5 years since you played that last piece, and then so you learn from that. And I learned a great deal by observing and watching, and in fact, sitting in rehearsals is a really important part. So after I graduated from University of Michigan, I was living in Ann Arbor for another 4 years, and during that time I was doing some cover conducting for the Detroit Symphony. So I got to watch Naomi Jarvi in the early 90s, and he was making lots and lots of recordings of the Detroit Symphony. And being around a really fine ensemble like that, you learn a great deal about what to do and what not to do, and how to treat an orchestra, and how to develop, and what they did to get the sound that they wanted, and the technique that they use. I mean, there's just so much to learn. And then when you actually do it yourself, you're like, oh no. You get one shot at it, and they'll eat you alive. You get sort of thrown to the wolves a little bit. And I had an experience like that. I mean, you have to survive. It's sink or swim, and you jump in, and you just have to be able to do it. And you make some mistakes along the way, but if you're honest and transparent, they will forgive you that. And if they see that you're really quick to learn and willing to learn, and don't mess them about, they'll give you a shot. Right. But they are
they have spent many, many years perfecting their instrument, so they are brilliant at what they do. So there's this mutual respect of like, well, what are you going to teach me? What do you know that I already don't know?
I can see that happen a lot.
And so it really takes a very special personality or person to be able to cajole, invite, refine, or even work with a group. And, you hear at the very top level, there are just a few individuals that have that gift, and it's recognized as such. And it's a fascinating study, actually.
Yeah, because I can imagine those musicians and their skill are off the charts, right? Like, just incredible. And I could see, like, at someone gets at a certain point, musicianship wise, they're like, okay, who's this guy coming in? Which is, fair enough, right? And so you coming in and you're like, how am I gonna kind of be like, hey, like.
So put it like a sports analogy. You're a coach of a football team. You've got these amazing talents.
Yeah.
But you've got to sort of get them with all of their talents to actually work together as a team,
right,
to make the score.
Yeah, right.
It takes a team. And like that, you got a principal oboe, you got a principal violin, you got this and that, and they've all got to come together, and they want to play together, and they can play together quite happily on their own without you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, totally.
They can play, they could ignore you and just put their head down and play it because they're that good. So they almost have to invite you in, to say, okay, yeah, or they'll just say, nah, no thanks.
Right.
And they don't actually say that, you just feel it.
Yeah. So the musicians are so good that you kind of have to earn their mutual respect slowly.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, this is my 8th season now with the San Luis Obispo Symphony. I was part of a search, where they invited 5 conductors to come in and work with the orchestra for a week.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating time because everyone's asking you questions, looking at you sideways, going, what's he going to be like? Yeah.
Who's this new guy?
Yeah. What does he say? And I think ultimately it's about the music.
Right.
You have to, have the ability to make something and then produce it, bring it to fruition and develop and bring it to performance level.
Yeah.
And that went well, obviously, and I was chosen and offered a job, and it's been a really wonderful period of time just working with the musicians of the San Luis Obispo Symphony. We've had a number of auditions over the years, and new people have come in and developed the idea of auditioning for the orchestra to raise the standard and just to improve. You always want to strive to do a better job, right?
Right.
And so we've been able to do some really nice music and some cool programs, and even the program that's coming up. I don't know when you pop, but
yeah, it'll be a little bit, but yeah, it'll come out. Yeah.
So, as a music director, part of the job, besides just actually conducting the rehearsals and actually doing the concerts, is actually you're a general manager. You have to plan ahead 18 months to 2 years of the next season. You got to think about the soloists you're going to use. You have to think about the repertoire. You have to think about the costs. What is it going to cost? The library expenses, the personnel expenses. How does that equate with box office? You're jack of all trades.
Not even the music stuff.
No, that's
what you said.
Yeah, you've got to be a good manager. You've got to be well organized. And then when it comes to rehearsals, you've got to structure your rehearsals. You've got 2.5 hours of a service, right? A rehearsal.
Yeah.
You've got these 3 pieces you've got to do. And you might have half the orchestra playing in one piece and then the rest don't play in the next one because it's a Mozart concerto,
I see.
So there's not the full 20th century size orchestra with 3 trombones, tuba, and 3 trumpets and 5 horns. Some of the classical pieces like Beethoven just uses 2 of each woodwind, that's 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, and then 2 trumpets, 2 horns, and a timpani. And that's the woodwind and brass section. It's not the big, expansive, like full percussion and everything else. So you also got to think about, well, what are they going to play in the concert if they're sitting around,
Right.
So it's a lot of that organisation, and of course you get excited about bringing soloists in, and then you've got to have a relationship with the soloists so that they want to come and play, and then the the audience has to get to know the soloists, and so you might have to do a pre-concert talk and introduce them, and they want to know who that person is.
Who the person is, yeah. So how did you come to here? Like, because you're in Michigan or Detroit, and then you come on the Central Coast.
Well, okay, so after in 1994, I got a job in Memphis.
Oh, cool.
I moved down there to be the assistant conductor. And I was there for a couple of years. And then, actually, I was there for 1 year, and then Toledo Symphony, which I'd been sort of doing some guest work with for 3 years while I was living in Ann Arbor, they called me and said they offered me a job as associate conductor. Mm-hmm. So the way is you start off as an assistant associate, and then you become a music director, which is the head honcho. For the bigger orchestras, they have like 2 or 3 conductors on staff, like Detroit.
Yeah, right.
So I ended up, after being in Memphis, I came back to the area, to Toledo, Ohio, which is about an hour south of Ann Arbor, and I was the associate conductor, resident conductor of the Toledo Symphony for 5 years.
Yeah.
That was an amazing opportunity because you're working full-time with a full-time orchestra. They do 8 services a week for 40 weeks. A lot of the programs that I had to do were like 1 rehearsal put on the show, neighborhood concerts, church concerts, going to small towns and performing over there. They do a lot of touring. They do 9 classical pairs in the city, but they do a lot of community work. So, and the music director was off doing other things, so you get to be in charge.
Nice.
And it's good because you're sort of under his tutelage or her tutelage. They're your boss.
Yeah,
and,
right.
They can sort of help you along the way, but you're sort of learning in the trenches. You're learning about all of these things. It's like being a farm team,
Yeah,
you're in the farm team.
Yeah.
And then in 1997, I got a job with the Mansfield Symphony, concurrent with the Toledo. So I was music director of a smaller orchestra, so I was sort of cutting my teeth on that. And then opportunities come along. You hear about a music directorship going somewhere, and there's one in Wichita, so I applied for that, and I got through all of the preliminaries, and I got invited to guest conduct there as one of 6 finalists, and I won the job. And so in 2000 I got that job, but I also got the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra, so I left Toledo and moved to Madison in 2000, and then a month later I got Wichita. So I got these 2 jobs within a space of a month. So for the next 10 years I commuted down to Wichita while living with my family in Madison, Wisconsin. And then in 2016, that job in Wichita ended. In 2010, that was a 10-year contract, and then I applied for some other jobs, and this came up, and I applied for this, and it just worked,
Have you ever been out here?
What's that?
Have you ever been out to San Luis at all before then?
No, I had not.
Okay.
I didn't even know where it was.
Most people do.
I've been to LA and I've been up to Santa Barbara. I just hadn't been further and driven the whole way up to the San Francisco coast. But I came out, I looked around, I thought, wow, this is a fantastic.
You're like, I see all the bike paths.
Oh,
here.
yeah.
I know you're a big biker.
I am. I do like biking. No, it just worked out. And what's really nice is they're very friendly. And I think we just sort of, it was a good mix. It was a good marriage. It's a good combination, and I've really enjoyed it. I still have the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra. I just celebrated 25 years up there. It's been a good place to raise a family. Our 3 children are grown adults now. My wife is a violinist. She's turned her hand to other things. She's writing and doing things. We've got a couple of grandchildren now in Milwaukee. But that idea of having 2 jobs, I think it sharpens your skills because you can apply relationships and soloists that you've managed to work with in one orchestra. You can invite them to there, and vice versa. You can sort of cross-pollinate.
Right.
And also, this is a full symphony orchestra, so it has some major...
Yeah, we might have to wrap this up pretty soon.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so, I have a full symphony, so I can do major repertoire like that, and then with the chamber orchestra, it's slightly smaller, and you do more intimate repertoire. So I have a great selection of opportunities between the 2 orchestras.
That's awesome. All right. Well, since there's song out here, it's probably not going to be a good show. So, so you're performing with the SLO Orchestra. When's your next performance here, so we can get that plugged in?
Well, today's
Today?
Friday. Today's Friday. Tomorrow's Saturday, the 2nd of November, we will have a concert. It's our second classic series featuring Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition, Mozart's Magic Flute Overture, a work by Stefan Podell called Cayucas by the Sea. It's a brand new piece.
Oh, nice.
And our featured work, which is a Paderewski piano concerto with soloist Janina Filkowska, who's from Germany but is a Polish-Canadian pianist. And part of that series is that we're combining with the Paderewski Festival from Paso Robles, which happens once a year in the first weekend of November. We're combining with that festival to bring the two organizations together in a collaboration. So
that's cool.
They're coming down to our concert, and we're doing some activities. She's giving a masterclass later today. The next concert is on New Year's Eve. It's called Rhapsody in Blue with George Gershwin.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
cool.
at the PAC, 7:30. And then our next concert after that is February the 7th, our Classics 3. It's an all-orchestral program, music by Schubert, Beethoven, and Tchaikovsky. Then 2 more concerts, March the 7th, and then May the 2nd or 3rd. It's the first weekend of May.
It'll be
Saturday.
out before the one in December.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be out for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll plug all that for sure. So anything else you want to add? I mean, you're here and you're amazing, and you're conducting the SLO Symphony and just kind of grinding away at it, huh?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate being on the show, and
Yeah.
what a unique opportunity this is. I'd say to any young person out there or parents of people with young children, have them study music.
Yeah.
It's as important as learning a sport because
Totally.
it teaches you so much.
I would agree.
And I really am an advocate for public school education in terms of your ensembles learning. We have a program with the San Luis Obispo Symphony called Strings in the Schools. We can put a string instrument in every child's hand to learn a string instrument, and then they can feed into our youth orchestra programs. When programs get cut, I mean,
Yeah, and that's the first thing to get cut.
yeah,
Yeah.
thankfully the band programs are very strong, but
True.
there aren't string programs, and that's hard. It's not easy to learn a string instrument,
Yeah.
and so we have a whole library of over 100 instruments at the SLO Symphony available. We've had a long history of doing this, and we want to make that available to all young students and children in SLO County. That's available.
Awesome.
We have a music van. We have an instrument petting zoo at our rehearsals. So we have a program called No Ties Allowed. It's on the Saturday morning of a concert. It's our dress rehearsal. It's an open dress rehearsal from 11 to 1. You can bring your family in. It's free. You can watch the orchestra rehearse.
Oh, really?
Kids can watch. My inspiration was I was 8 years old. I went to a symphony concert and I saw those instruments playing and I said, I want to learn one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. It got me switched on. I was learning the piano at the time, but I really saw the violin. I said, I want to learn that. And I saw the horn. I said, I want to learn that. And I saw the bassoon. I want to learn that. I couldn't do it all. That's expensive. So I started learning the violin. That's what I went to the store and said, Mum and Dad, I want to buy that violin. And they said, well, if you really want it, you're going to have to work for it.
Yeah.
I said, good ethic,
Yeah.
Doesn't come to you, on a silver platter. You got to work for it.
Right.
And I think kids appreciate the idea of working hard for something. It's important. Anyway, I would love to see
People
students,
come. Yeah, people come and check it
and
out.
appreciate it. Yeah. It's something for everyone. It touches the soul. Music touches the soul. We didn't get the explosions in the sky, but you sent me some stuff, and I learned about the Japanese composer, and you were talking about post-rock music, and that's a really interesting conversation for another time, but I'd love to explore that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. Let's wrap this up.